Okay, wait a second. Wait, they're not going to the federal penitentiary. I've been to the federal penitentiary. That's not where they're going. They're going to a minimum security camp. Judge Boulware, federal judge in Nevada, said some very entertaining and educational things at a sentencing conference I attended 2 years ago. And with hopes that his insights will help all of you prepare for a sentencing hearing, I'm knocking out this video on Friday, May 17th. Now, Judge Boulware, if you're watching this, and if I interpret some things incorrectly, forgive me, though I think I stand still what you were trying to convey, which was the greatest consequence for a white-collar defendant or person going to federal prison might not necessarily be time in a minimum security camp. While it can be hard and tragic and depressing and difficult for some, I know for many of you who are going to federal prison, it won't turn out to be the hardest part of this experience because it's clearly defined with a beginning and an end. Therefore, if he said, I know y'all are going to a minimum security camp, it ain't the pen, what then did he then articulate? Well, he suggested there could be some value in sharing all of the collateral consequences that accompany a federal conviction, consequences that may be measurably worse than serving 6, 9, 12, or 15 months in a minimum security camp. I'm going to share some insights on these collateral consequences and how you can articulate them to your sentencing judge in this video, because it's of no use to say, Your Honor, as a result of this case and the government's case, I can't bear arms, or I can't find a job, or I have no money, and I'm very depressed, and I'm moody, and I'm down, and the bank's fired me. A lot of judges will say, well, yeah, shouldn't have broken the law if you were so concerned about all of that. So like everything else, messaging matters. Evidence in the record you build matters, and I'm going to touch on that before I do. As always, welcome to the White Collar Advice channel, and I want all of you to know our team is growing. We've had a wonderful last 12 months, and we're now continuing to grow our team across the country. So if you have interest in working with our team, we're developing a spot on our site where you can apply, submit your information. For now, if you have interest, just put a note in the comment, and I will send you the link, and we'll offer more insights on what these positions could be. People have asked, is it only going to be with people who have hired your team? No, though it's helpful because we know people who hire our team are willing to do the work, and we've seen that documented work. So we're super excited to be growing. We hope you can grow with us. While you're here, please like, subscribe, and comment. Now, as we talk about the collateral consequences, let's be really obvious and address the reality. How many of you feel before you get sentenced, it's the hardest part, the waiting, the stress, the uncertainty? It's the hardest part of the journey. I know, but it's of no value just to say it's hard. What's better, according to what I've learned from judges, including Judge Boulware, is to articulate not just what it's like to wait, what you are doing while waiting. I filmed a YouTube short video I have yet to post, and in it I share this story of two bankers with the same conduct, same crime, same restitution. Both were expecting probation. One got a year of home confinement. You can guess which person worked with us. The other got a year and a day in federal prison. Same case, same conduct. One avoided prison, one didn't. Well, the judge articulated how impressed he was with one of these defendants' work while waiting to get sentenced. And in fact, the judge said, 200? Did I hear 200? And our client said 206, Your Honor. The 206 was how many job applications he filled out after getting fired from his job as a banker for a scheme, and he ended up finding employment at Lowe's and driving for Lyft. The other defendant, while waiting to get sentenced, while living in this very difficult period of time, according to the government and through his own acknowledgments, didn't do a whole lot. No one will hire me, Your Honor. My reputation has been ruined. It's been a very depressing and hard time. Same case, two fundamentally different outcomes because of how someone began to overcome the collateral consequences of waiting to get sentenced, looking for work, submitting employment applications, taking a job beneath your skill set, getting a letter from an employer articulating the value that you provide, being transparent about your conduct in crime, acknowledging all of these consequences, but rather than run from it, begin to endure and overcome them. Are you doing that as you approach sentencing? Are you developing and building a timeline? Timelines are something we're beginning to create for people in our community. Get into trouble, what do? Write my biography, begin to volunteer, begin to look for work, save up a little bit of money, contribute and give it back, cooperate, proffer, grow my network. Whatever it might be, we develop and build this timeline, and we share it with stakeholders, because rather than simply saying, oh, this is really tough to wait, Your Honor, you can say, as a result of my bad choices, I am enduring these consequences, Your Honor, but here's how I'm overcoming them. So in so doing, you are acknowledging I can no longer be a banker or a doctor or a lawyer, but I'm not complaining about it. I'm taking Action. As a result of my conduct, Your Honor, my reputation is destroyed, and rather than lament these DOJ press releases, this is what I'm doing. I'll also touch on that in this video. What are the collateral consequences you're enduring? Just don't tell the judge, here is the plan to overcome them. I'm going to speak more about employment when. Let's do it right now, shall we? I know at my sentencing hearing, a big part of the reason Judge Wilson departed wasn't because I got a coveted 5K1. I didn't cooperate. My co-defendant cooperated against me. Fine, have no grudge. He had a wife and 4 daughters. He did what he thought was best. I worked for 3 years before I went to sentencing. And as a result of my conduct, I told Judge Wilson, I forfeited my right to be a securities broker. And I knew by pleading guilty, I would most likely forfeit my right to be a real estate agent. But it didn't change. While I had my license, I was working every single day to close deals leading up to that sentencing hearing. And he commented on the fact that my conduct was excellent, as it should be as a real estate agent, because of course I turned in letters, not from my mom and dad who were going to articulate I shouldn't go to prison. I'm reading more useless character reference letters than ever that essentially tell a judge what to do, and they enable the defendant's conduct. Horrific, don't turn in any letter if you're going to do that. But in my case, I had letters from clients articulating the value and ethics I delivered to them while I was working as a real estate agent over 3 years. That influenced Judge Wilson. So if a collateral consequence is you lost your job, it probably makes sense to prove to the government that you can earn a wage as a law-abiding citizen. You can demonstrate to a very cynical judge, I lost my career because of my bad choices, but I'm working hard again. And I'm rebuilding, Your Honor, at a job that is no longer a banker, a doctor, or a lawyer. Do you see how that shows humility? Where when a judge is contemplating sentence, he may think, the government wants 2 years here, a year and a day. This dude has really already suffered a lot, right? He's been waiting 3 years to get sentenced. He's lost and forfeited his license. That's a pretty significant consequence. He went to undergraduate school, law school, or medical school. Damn, he trained for a really long time to get here, and now he's 42. He owes millions in restitution. He can no longer be a doctor or a lawyer. Is it really in the interest of society for me to send him to federal prison for 2, 3, or 4 years? Or is he beginning to get the point as a result of the press coverage, of losing his licenses, working at Lowe's and Lyft, where he can no longer be a banker earning $750,000 a year? I know it's like the 9th time in this video I'm going to say, just don't tell him about the collateral consequences. I know what I'm doing here. Just don't tell them. Show them how you're overcoming it. Your Honor, it's part of the journey. I'm grateful to drive for Lyft. I'm grateful to work at Lowe's and the opportunity that's been presented to me. And I hope it's the next step. Do that, I'm begging you. Continuing on, let's talk a little bit about what matters most to the court. Victims, 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 victims. Too many people, the victims are a throwaway. They're like on tangential on the periphery. Yeah, it's about the victims, however, but no, bad messaging here. I know some judges will reward defendants who really sacrifice and make clear it is about the victims. I had a lawyer one time laugh at me, and sometimes people laugh at me. Someone laughed at me when I did my USC video with my helmet on, my catcher's hat. My son wears that hat around the house now. It's awesome. Someone laughed at me because I said something like, we had a client, he had like $1.7 million in restitution to Medicare, and he made like a restitution payment of like $4,800. And the lawyer's like, are you freaking kidding me? You think $4,800 is really going to move the needle for this judge? He owes $1.7 million. And I acknowledge, yes, it was more symbolic than anything. And we had a judge in Los Angeles comment on the fact that, yes, he made a measly $4,800 restitution payment, but guess what? Relative to what he had, relative to what he made and saved, it was truly significant, and he got some credit for it. So as you fill out your timeline, it is one thing to say, I'm sorry. It is another thing to actually build and document what sorry means. I'm working in a job. I'm saving as much as I can, setting aside as much as I can for victims, as much as I can for my family. That's how you overcome the consequence of this. You just don't talk about it. You show what you're actually doing. And some consequences you frankly might not be able to overcome. I know there's some movement with convicted felons having the right to bear arms, but as of now, most people cannot. And we had someone in our community who grew up in Arkansas who was very transparent with the judge and said, as a consequence of my bad choices, I am forfeiting something that has been in our family for more than a century, going duck hunting with my grandfather and my father and my children and my brothers and siblings. This is a big part of what our family does. And I know because I made terrible and awful choices, that is a family adventure that I can no longer, that's like my third arm, Your Honor. And I'm not telling you this to guilt you or anything other than to say, I should have thought about my actions before I broke the law, and I know regardless of what happens at my sentencing today, this is something that I will endure for the rest of my life. It's my fault. That is a significant consequence for some people. Now, additionally, it's a massive consequence, the idea of family and how they're impacted. And I read too many letters from defendants that say this has been very devastating for my family, very awful for my children. All true. What is the path to overcome that and articulate to a judge that regardless of the sentence, you are creating tasks and doing things that will ensure your family will emerge stronger, that you're living with dignity, that you're planning, that by virtue of this planning, you will never return to another courtroom. Indeed, we have people in our community who are engaged in educational programs with their family, and they share this work with the judge. People in our community will complete our Preparing for Success After Prison course. You know, it's funny, I've mentioned this in several videos, and about 100 people have reached out with interest in doing it. And even when for a while we had offered it for free at no cost, 2 or 3% of the people would go through it. You want to know why? It requires work, because it's one thing to say I'm going to do the work and another thing to actually do the work. But the people that actually doing it are able to add the completion of this very extensive writing project to their timeline. We have people who are now sharing it with their probation officer, sharing it with their sentencing judge, doing it with their children and walking their children through their plans to become better, or even in the beginning, learning to overcome the collateral consequences, learning to introspect and think and understand how we got here, not running from the fact that we're embroiled in this situation, leading. I shared a YouTube short video about an executive in Tucson who called to tell me that some kids at his kid's school posted the fact that he was getting sentenced, and he didn't know that anyone knew that he was getting sentenced because there wasn't a DOJ press release, and his children are devastated. They had no idea until they read about this posting at school, and the kids were making fun of them. Aha, your daddy's going to prison. He said, I've made a terrible situation worse. I should have led and began to prepare my children. You can articulate to a judge what you're doing to prepare your family for the consequences of your bad actions. Do you notice I continue to use the word actions and work, and some people will do it and some will not? It's also surprising how many people will come into our community and say, I like your videos, thank you, or I hate your videos, thank you, but my situation is different. This, a lot of it, hey, it makes sense, man. Good messaging doesn't really apply to me. And that's typically with people who presume they're going to get probation or a shorter sentence. And of course, if you think you're going to get probation or a short sentence, you should prepare as if you're going to get a life sentence. Work, contribute, educate yourself, and continue to share stakeholders what you're doing to overcome. To that end, we had someone in our community who was willing to do the work with their substance abuse and alcohol issues. And rather than just disclose they had a problem, it was a massive collateral consequence for this person that he had to stop drinking. To be fully transparent, he told the judge it was brutal. And as a result of this quitting drinking, he threw on 40 pounds. He began to smoke. It's something that he had relied on. And he clearly articulated to the judge, with the help of a counselor that we had referred him to, that I am making amends. I will not make this any harder on my family. And rather than show or tell you that I'm not going to drink, here is my plan. And Your Honor, it has been brutal, but also through this brutal process, Your Honor, I'm getting healthier. Despite the weight gain and smoking, which I hope to overcome, I'm no longer drinking 15 to 18 beers a day, and I'm a better father because of it. I'm leading because of it, Your Honor. So I'm not happy to say that I might be going to federal prison, but I am making progress and learning lessons. I am changing. Are you changing? Now, I know some of you watching this video might think, Justin, God, my right leg feels like it was run over from all the running. If anyone is selling a new healthy right leg, I am buying. Gosh, am I in pain. I need you to do the work. I need you to demonstrate what it is you are doing to make amends, how you are filling in the timeline that shows your growth and productivity and your plans moving forward. Because then you can proudly say, despite all of these collateral consequences, Your Honor, I am going to make it. I am going to succeed. I am going to overcome, and I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to document it, and I'm going to share it with you all the way through the process. It's stunning how many defendants think once they're sentenced, the judge never follows them again. Now, some judges, like Judge Carter in Santa Ana, will say, come and see me when you're in the halfway house. I'm going to check up on you. I'm going to follow your progress. But if you don't hear that from a judge, some people are like, oh, I will never hear and see my judge again. But how many of you make promises at sentencing and then actually follow through or don't follow through? Judges know, but someday you're going to want something from them. Someday you're going to want something from a case manager or a probation officer. Have you done the work? Have you built this extensive timeline that shows that you're worthy of it? As I wrap up this video about overcoming or articulating the collateral consequences of your conduct, let's touch on two more things. I know a big part of the reason a judge will sentence you to federal prison is the deterrence component, right? If you've already been sentenced, did your judge say something akin to, I know you're not going to return to this courtroom as another defendant, but I want to deter people from breaking the law. One thing that you can do as an executive, presuming you have interest in helping people and you're able to communicate an authentic, honest message, is do something that dozens of clients of ours at White Collar Advice do. Speak with me on stage at universities and articulate. We've done it at BYU, Stanford, USC, my alma mater, the business school, Mississippi State, whatever it is, our team will work with executives and prepare them to speak to students. And that message is very authentic and honest, sharing a message of the collateral consequences of breaking the law with hopes of deterring future leaders on breaking the law and the consequences that follow. And I know we've had judges comment on the fact that people in our community have done that without pay. You know, they just want to contribute and give back. Sure, it can be a mitigating factor because the professor writes an excellent letter on letterhead speaking to the value. But if you want to help others and help yourself, there's value in sharing some of these life lessons with universities. And if you have interest in doing some of that, send us a message or schedule a call. We can discuss that process. You are in a position to help and find meaning through this process and use your experience as an asset. Or you can run from it or pretend it didn't happen. Or coming back to that executive that I discussed earlier, you can look for work that you think might be beneath your skill set, but see as a stepping pattern, but could help you get a shorter sentence. Or you can be the guy that does absolutely nothing and say, I'm going to get promotion. I'm a first-time offender. It's all good. And they don't work. They don't manage. They don't grow their network. Last but not least, you can do a good job of articulating really the lifelong stigma that accompanies a conviction, but rather than saying a lifelong stigma, Your Honor, it's not fair, you can articulate there is a lifelong stigma. And I know long after the sentencing hearing, these are things, Your Honor, that I've got to learn to overcome, and I will. Banking issues, resilient issues, housing issues, employment issues. I have young children, and the fact that I might be in prison while my children are growing up, or even if you avoid prison, there is still a lifelong stigma that follows. How can you articulate this lifelong stigma in a way that doesn't reek of complaining or, oh, woe is me, it's not fair? You can do it by being authentic. I should have thought more about the lifelong consequences that follow, Your Honor, because irrespective of my prison sentence, I know that I have a long road ahead of me. I've lost my career as a doctor. I owe more than $1 million in restitution. So what I will do, I assure you, is develop a new skill set and find a new career that will enable me to pay my victims back. It might take a while. Be authentic. If it's going to take you a while, be authentic. The judge knows it may take a while to pay $1 million back. Be authentic. I will find a new career, Your Honor. I will develop a new skill set that will enable me to pay my victims back, that will enable me to sustain my family. And do you understand it? So that's how I'm going to close. If Judge Boulware, a federal judge, says, you ain't going to the pen, that's not the hardest part of this process. Does it make sense then to articulate you are well aware of the collateral consequences and lay out this timeline, this vision, month over month over month over month leading up to sentencing of how you're overcoming it? Then after you've been sentenced, continuing to build and develop the timeline, because I know someday you're going to be on federal probation and the first thing the probation officer is going to do is look at your probation report, which probably isn't great. That could be a big chasm or gap between the probation report and sentencing. My right leg is in a lot of pain. I have to wrap this up. PSR probation could be years. What have you done? What does that timeline look like? How you answer that question will determine the next, not just the sentence or how early you get out of prison, supervised release, the next 10, 15, 20 years of your life. And I know from experience, because on the 20th of May, on Monday, will be my 15-year release from federal prison. I may cover that too. You're awesome. Thank you for joining our community. And if you have interest in joining our team, leave a comment